Hello everybody, this is Luna calling, lovers under naughty ataraxy, calling out to all of us fellow travellers who have been embroiled in a royal situationship, as we are going to be exploring in this week's episode. This week we're very lucky, we have a special guest, Eloise Mignon, who's been teaching at the American University this semester, and I'm particularly excited as she is a fellow Franco-Australian based in Melbourne. As usual, I'm Val.
I'm Ol.
And welcome, Eloise.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
So, what are we doing? We've finished the meditations. I feel like we didn't make much of a big deal of it, but where to now? I thought we were done. I was promised that we were finished with Descartes, but Descartes is not finished with us.
It's never ending, and I think what happens now is there's a meeting, there's an encounter.
Oh.
You know, and all three of us have been looking at this very curious encounter between Descartes and a certain Princess Elizabeth of Bohemia, who is a very singular character, somebody who's an intellectual, who is a philosopher in her own right. She's also a diplomat. She's the founder of a convent later on in her life, which proves somewhat of a haven for religious dissidents. She's engaged in all kinds of intellectual conversations. She's politically active. And they have this awkward meeting very, very early on. And the first trace we have of this is in 1643.
Okay, and so where does this meeting occur? Right? Are they in France? Are they in Holland? Where's Descartes? You know, we've been kind of following him through all of his ramblings throughout Europe. Where is this supposed meeting supposed to have occurred? Where does this correspondence start?
Well, I imagine this as being some enormous 17th century cocktail party in one of those ballrooms.
With costumes.
Exactly, and wigs.
And wigs.
And masks, most importantly,
And
you know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's why they missed each other. They're at this kind of masquerade, cabaret ball, like a carnival-esque ball where, you know, eyes wide shut style, you know, the ball.
And so we think they missed each other, right? Because we have a sense from Elizabeth's first letter that she missed out on a private audience with Descartes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, she apologises. She says, look, if I'd been properly introduced to you, I would have sought out a conversation with you. Because actually, I've got a problem. I guess there's
hierarchy, right, and protocol. So she would have to say, you come to me, not he couldn't just knock on her door or whatever. Like
exactly.
She has to send him a card or something. Or
and I think he failed to follow the proper protocol or didn't think it was in his place.
Okay.
And so she's opening a door by writing this first letter. She's showing the initiative.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, in Descartes' defense, I would be terrified and incredibly shy too. You know, if there was a princess, you know, this is the creme de la creme of royal society, I would be a little bit scared too to approach somebody. You know, it's already difficult enough approaching somebody in a bar, you know, let alone a princess.
Okay.
But wasn't there Mary, the Australian, who met the Danish prince?
She met a guy in a bar.
She met the Danish prince in the bar and they got married.
She married Hamlet.
Right.
No, but I mean, recently, wasn't there the Australian woman who married into Danish royalty? And now she's Princess
Mary of Denmark.
Anyway, sorry, I digress.
So I think there's a lesson for all of our listeners here. If you do see royalty in a bar, don't be shy.
Don't pull a Descartes.
I mean,
okay,
yeah.
so
except for Prince Andrew, just don't keep away from him.
Yeah, just stay away from that kind of royalty. Okay, so we now have.
I expected more from you, Val.
I expect more from myself. So now we're back in the royal protocol. Elizabeth has sent this letter to Descartes, opening the door. But she's a little bit miffed with his system. She seems to have a bit of a problem with his philosophy, right?
Well, she doesn't go softly. I mean, this is the first letter that she writes to him.
Yeah.
And she says, look, I've just read your metaphysics. It's lovely, but there's a massive problem in the sixth meditation.
Right, smack bang.
Yeah. And some of the people that I did a little bit of reading about Elizabeth because I'm so fascinated by her. And one commentator says, look, she basically is the founder of the mind-body problem, right? She's the one who gives
persists today, right?
Exactly.
I mean, in many ways, like there's no real definitive answer to her question. Like,
there's all kinds of controversy.
Yeah.
Like she gives it the name that this is actually a problem, right?
Yeah. How, she says. How does it?
Yeah. Exactly as she says in the first letter. How can the soul of man determine the spirits of the body so as to accomplish voluntary actions? Only being a thinking substance, right? This is a massive problem, and one that Ol and I have been grappling with for far too long, as far as I'm concerned. With this, but what is the actual relationship? Because I feel like it was a bit climactic at the end of the sixth meditation. What is the relationship?
Well, this is why we found ourselves in this correspondence with Elizabeth and Descartes, because precisely it follows from the sixth meditation. That's where she attacks his system. And she has her own position on causality, because basically she says, you want the mind to be able to move the body, right? But how does movement occur? You always need to be some kind of, you always need to have an impulsion that is communicated to the thing that's moved.
Yeah.
According to the manner in which it's pushed by whatever moves it. So the kind of effect that occurs depends on the thing that gives the movement in the first place.
Yeah.
Depends on its shape, depends on what we now call its momentum, its weights, its contact area. So she has this it's a mechanist theory of causation, right? And she says for this to occur, for shape and surface and movement to be communicated, you need extension.
Yeah. It all has to play out in extension, right? To even think about the relationship between cause and effect between different bodies and things like that, it needs to have extension. And what famously does not have extension in Descartes' whole system?
The mind.
It's the mind, the famous indivisible mind, right? It doesn't have extension, so there's this fundamental ontological split between mind and body, where mind, indivisible, cannot extend. So how could it possibly relate to bodies which do extend and which are divisible, right? There's an ontological problem that she's just hit him smack back in it.
So it's a how question, but later she also asks a what question as well, right? She's like, what actually is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is
the substance that you determine to be this immaterial,
well, it's a
indivisible
big question.
thing?
Because she's saying if you have these two, if you keep on insisting that the body and the mind are two completely distinct substances, right? How on earth can you also conceive
of their union?
Yeah, of their union, that they're one and the same thing.
Yeah.
And I've already got an initial problem, which is it the case that our minds have no parts? I mean, is that how we think of our minds? Is this just a weird 17th century conception, or do we still agree with Descartes? Are our minds indivisible?
I think maybe the problem that Descartes is very implicitly trying to defend is he's not talking about the mind as the way that we think about the mind as being situated in our brain. He's trying to defend the idea of the immortal soul that continues beyond the body, beyond death. I feel like there's some religious thing that he's trying to defend, and that has to be indivisible. I don't know, that can't be dependent on the body. It's like the soul that passes off into the different world after the soul that goes to heaven, right?
I thought he did locate the mind in the brain, or was that someone else?
No, he does.
He does. Sorry, yeah.
There's an interface.
That's the place.
Right? There's a location, which is, as we said in the last episode, it's halfway between
smack bang
between Val's eyes and halfway in between his ears.
Yeah, he shot some arrows through my skull.
It's exactly in the middle.
But I think it's it's not that Descartes doesn't think that the mind is in the body, but I think he's trying to he has this. I don't know, for me it's an implicit thing. He's grappling with these theological questions, and I feel like this kind of immateriality, he wants to say that, maybe not mind but soul as well. Because of course in French, mind is esprit, which means mind and soul, right? So there's this kind of, anyway. Yeah. I don't know, that's one of the sticky problems, because we've been reflecting on this the whole time that we've been reading Descartes is, what kind of Christian is he? He doesn't want to get burnt at the stake. He's been accused of being a heretic, But, I feel like we've been talking about Descartes quite a bit in this and not enough about maybe Elizabeth.
Well, she actually... What's fascinating is that you have these 17th century letters. These are incredibly educated people, and they've got all of this rhetoric both at the beginning and at the end of the letter.
She was incredibly educated, right? We should point that out. I mean, I guess, for a 17th century woman, I mean, I guess she was the only one, but she had this she was in so many languages, and
Well, her
logic,
sister,
mathematics,
exactly.
all of this
Yeah.
stuff.
and her sisters used to tease her, and they called her La Grecque.
La
Like,
Grecque,
the
yeah,
Greek, yeah, because
Greek.
she received this very kind of classical, scholastic, Aristotelian education that Descartes has been railing against, right? And it's kind of it's kind of funny that she's received this education and has just really just honed in on a really fundamental problem that Descartes is going to be having, using the institutional knowledge that he has been trying to reject. It's
Oh,
like,
that's interesting, because then he gives her a scholastic response as well, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's come home to roost, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, she's got this kind of incredible. But what a family as well. This incredible historical figure, right? She existed at all the intersect, like this incredible historical moment, right?
Is it 13 children? One of 13? Is that
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and quite a few of them die early on.
Okay.
I mean, it was a royal family, but they still had they were subject to all kinds of diseases, and then there were there was a boating accident. One of her brothers drowned, for example.
It's terrible.
But this is like a family that's at the absolute centre of European geopolitics, and it's like a world historical family.
Yeah.
Her father was none other than James the First, right?
Yeah.
King of both Scotland and England, who took over after Elizabeth the First. And he was the one, James Stewart, he was the one who actually came out with the doctrine of the divine right of kings.
Hang on, wait. That's Elizabeth's father. No,
Grandfather.
that's her grandfather.
That's
yeah,
her grandfather.
yeah.
So he comes up with the divine right of kings.
They all believed that back
he
then.
got
So
it
Louis
from
says,
French thinkers like Boudet and other
Yeah.
guys that pre-existed him.
Yeah.
But he does write these speeches where he's like unus rex, unus lex, unus rex, right?
Yeah.
Like he's all about the one and the kind of
So that's the name of the father in that family.
Yeah.
Grandfather says, we have been chosen by God to rule. These
We're
European
at the top
peoples,
of the chain
right?
Yeah.
besides God.
Yeah. And then what happens to her father? It's like one of these classic hysterics in the early days of Freud's practice, right? The father fails, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because her father is the most short-lived monarch up to that point in European history. He's called the Winter King because he just lasted for one winter before he was dethroned, right? There are all these political machinations in Bohemia, and he was supported by these Protestant electors who are like engaged in all kinds of machinations against the Catholic princes in Germany, right? And they decide that he's going to be their figurehead, and then they're not happy with him like a few months into his reign, and they dethrone him. So her grandfather says, we are chosen by God to reign.
Yeah.
Her father tries to fulfill that, gets dethroned, they're thrown into exile, and from that point onwards, she has no proper home, and she's, and she's basically in exile in The Hague.
But then isn't like also her and her siblings and then their children are also, really actively engaged in the reconstruction, right? After, is this the period of the 30-year war and things like that?
Exactly.
She's engaged in, trying to negotiate the Treaty of Westphalia, there's an effort to restore the English monarchy after the English Civil War, right? So it's like
she's engaged in that.
So it's like they're reconstructing what has been destroyed or what the father failed to enact, and like the kids are left with this just absolute mess. The children are trying to reconstruct this Europe torn asunder. So it's a really, like you said, I like that. It's a world historical family, right?
She needs help.
Yeah, she needs help. She needs a bit of help.
A little bit of assistance.
Yeah.
Thanks very
I mean,
much.
she's a bit depressed as well, right?
Yeah.
Like that's it's
I'd be a bit sad.
understandable.
I think I think my family, relationships are a bit complicated. I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to appreciate the things are a little bit simpler in my neck of the woods, right? And I just because like I really want to see how Descartes is going to respond to Elizabeth's charge. I mean, it's just because we're also talking about the history of not only the history of politics but of philosophy. So it's her sister's daughter, Sophie. Her
sister becomes the patron of Leibniz.
Yes. So Sophie becomes the patron of Leibniz. Sophie's daughter, Sophie Charlotte, was tutored by Leibniz. So there's also this kind of patronage of one of the other great, the last great. What do they call Leibniz? The last great, not polymath, but he's like the last great, incredibly erudite, just across all of the different fields of thought. So they're engaged in this patronage of one of the great philosophers, right? But yeah, it seems like Elizabeth's got a bit of a problem.
Well, she actually, at the very end of that first letter to him, she does a very curious thing. She says, look, these are my soul's speculations. These are my uncertain speculations about this mind-body problem. Can you not? I know that you're a better doctor for my soul than anybody else.
Oh, yes.
Please, will you observe Hippocrates' oath, and cure me of these troubles, right? And so she positions him as a doctor right at the very beginning, and asks him for a remedy to these metaphysical troubles that she has.
Yeah, which I mean speaks a lot to the reading that we were doing of Meditation 6 precisely at the end. It's like it's very much a meditation on the question of health and illness, and what happens when there are dysfunctions in the body and things like that. And I love this kind of moment where it's like fulfill the Hippocratic oath, or the J.J. Cale, call the doctor. I think I'm sick. I haven't had any medicine. It's this kind of interesting relationship that she establishes. Here I am, princess, be my doctor.
Yeah, I've just got this little problem with your philosophy.
Yes.
But she also says, supply me with remedies without making them public.
Yeah, interesting.
Which is interesting. And apparently she didn't want their correspondence published.
No, because she thought
later
that
on,
ill-intentioned people might
might
read it the wrong way.
Right, yeah, sure.
At one moment she's quite unhappy that one of her letters to him may have fallen into the wrong hands, because she thought it might be misinterpreted and used as evidence that she's actually an atheist because she's has these metaphysical questions. So, I mean, it was basically publicly ill-advised to engage in metaphysical speculation because you could be seen as questioning church authorities.
And also, given all the geopolitical problems she was embroiled in, you definitely don't want to give your enemies any more letters against you. Then you've already had enough problems. You don't need to be accused of atheism on top of that. Okay.
So, in fact, aren't the letters that we have copies, right? Like that. I mean, people think they're authentic, but we're
not even sure how faithful they are as copies.
Okay.
And specifically, the problem for the scholars is there seems to be missing correspondence.
The Apollonian problem, is that
No, that there are gaps in the correspondence. Like it seems to start all of a sudden in 1643. Were there a few letters before that? There are certain points in which they have this period where they do these mathematical problems together, and she shows herself to be at least his equal in solving these difficult problems.
But that's lost, right? Like her response to
her actual solution to this
riddle problem.
Yeah, the problem that he sets her is lost. All we have is his response in which he says, "Oh, your solution is more elegant than mine."
Oh.
And then all of a sudden that stops, right?
Yeah.
And then he seems to pick it up the conversation later on, and say, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry. I heard that you were sick."
Okay.
So there's gaps.
There are gaps.
There's gaps in the knowledge. Well, you never know.
Yeah.
It's like every few years it feels like they find in some lost box in some basement of a library. Suddenly it's like, oh, there's all these books that Hegel wrote and they never saw the light of day. So maybe they're just sitting somewhere in The Hague.
They just found a 7th century English poem in Rome.
Oh, there you go.
Like last week.
Yeah,
it's an amazing discovery.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Who would have thought there's still more things to uncover in Europe? So, I mean, Descartes' response, it's a bit of a flatterer. I feel like they're flirting. There's something, he's being, he's like, oh, Elizabeth, you and your superhuman discourse, you've pinned me to the wall, like almost like, I'm not sure if it's like a taxidermist or a zoologist, where it's like you got the little butterfly and got the pins in the swing.
Descartes' butterfly.
Yeah, he's a little butterfly.
So he's pinned against the wall, and then he says, "You've got the body of an angel."
Yeah, exactly.
Does he actually say you've got the body of an angel? Or is that just your paraphrase? Oh, he does.
I don't know whether my French is wrong, but
it's been cut out of my translation. They're just like Descartes praises her.
he comes out very strong. Like he's very kind of flirty. He's like, oh, what an elegant mind. Not only do you have an elegant mind, but an elegant body as well,
Oh, I guess he has to say that, right?
Well, yeah. You're talking
again. Two different substances for him. It's
exactly.
You can't.
You got to compliment them separately.
He actually says he almost says being admitted to your presence would almost be too much for my poor mortal frame, because it would be like ascending to heaven from earth. It would just be too much. It's pure enjoyment.
Yeah.
Ah,
So I think we're going to use letters and appropriate this.
I love that for him as well. She's two things. Like, she's a body and a mind. It's like, well, they're just both. They're coming at him. You know, like he's like.
I don't know how to think your unity yet.
Yeah,
But let's keep talking.
So let's go through his like dodgy, evasive response.
Yeah, I'm not happy with this.
So he's kind of tricky. It's kind of a jujitsu move. Like he kind of like dodges a bullet and says, "Look, let's think about how we know things.
Yeah.
There are three types of knowledge based on three primitive notions.
Yeah.
Right. There are primitive notions, which means that, I mean, this is his like foundationalist approach to knowledge.
Yeah.
All forms of knowledge can be built up from these basic building blocks, these foundations, right?
Innate knowledge, right?
Yeah.
From these bits of innate knowledge, we can construct more and more complex objects.
But first, he does admit he's like, yeah, like I didn't give much time to the problem of union, right? Like I gave more time to proving thought, like
because I didn't want to distract the
Yeah,
reader.
yeah.
He says this very interesting line. It's like, I didn't want to distract their feeble minds by considering this, but he's like, yeah, you got me there.
Yeah.
So he says some of these primitive notions are like the most general ones being, number, and duration.
Yeah.
Right? And he drops those. And then he comes to this distinction which is super important to him. He says, we have primitive notions for everything, all of our knowledge concerning bodies, right?
Yeah.
And these primitive notions are things like extension, figure, and movement.
Yeah.
And what he seems to mean by primitive notions is you can't derive them from anything else.
Yes.
Like you have to assume them. They're like axioms in a way.
Yeah.
You've got to have somewhere where you start, right?
Okay.
And then we've got primitive notions concerning the sphere of the mind, right? So for example, thought, right? He claims you can't derive the concept of thought from anything else.
But the mind.
Yeah. And from thought, you can then derive further secondary notions like perception, imagination, memory, wishes and desires, right?
But I thought, it struck me that he's doing this kind of mode of classification because I feel like he's being very Aristotelian here. He's really like categorizing things in a super distinct way, right?
Well, he wants to say you've made a category mistake. That's his defense here. Basically, he's saying you're confusing categories. He's saying you're using notions from the sphere of extension and applying them to the sphere of the mind-body union, right? Yeah. So he's saying you're making a category mistake. So he has to do a taxonomy. He has to set out categories beforehand to make that argument in the first place.
But I find this so interesting precisely because, like specifically he says, okay, primitive notion that belongs to the mind is, imaginations. But doesn't he say in Meditation 5, I think it was, that imagination has to do with the body. Imagination is the life raft that we have out to the external world. And now here he's saying it's a primitive notion of the mind.
Well, I think you've got him there. And I think he basically is in Meditation 6. And so he wants to say that we have primitive notions that belong to this third sphere, which is the union of the mind and the body. And then he doesn't name them.
Yeah.
He just says, one of my primitive notions is the mind and the body are united. Yeah. Which is not a notion. It's just like, it's about 5 different words, first of all. So there's a union, right? And he says, basically, as I said before, you're using notions like extension and mechanical motion from the sphere of bodies, and you're applying them to the sphere of the union of the mind and the body, right? And he says you can't do that, right? Yeah.
You've made a category, Elizabeth, you have made a category error. You are trying to apply primitive notions of the body to primitive notions of the mind, right? And saying, why don't they function in the same way?
Yeah. And what I think is so he's making an excuse. Yes, it's evasive. But basically what he's doing here is anticipating entire schools in the philosophy of mind and saying those solutions don't work. So eliminativist programs like the Churchlands who say that everything that we speak of with regard to the mind, that's just folk psychology, that's just opinion, that's just ideology. It's just neurons firing. And what we need to adopt is a scientific language to describe brain states, right? And that kind of program, you're basically using notions from the sphere of extension and you're applying them to the mind. And Descartes, 340 years before they start doing that, says that's not going to work, right? You can't reduce the mind to matter, he's saying.
Yeah.
Nor can you reduce matter to mind. So you can't do
Yeah.
a Bishop Berkeley and say we're all just like fragments of God's imagination, and everything that appears to be material is just some part of like God's thinking.
Yeah.
So he's right from the outset, before this entire controversy has unfolded over centuries, he's kind of ruling out certain options very, very quickly.
Yes.
Saying that's not going to work.
Yeah, a little bit too quickly, because it seems like he's rarefying the distinction that Elizabeth is accusing him of, right? He's she's asking him, what is the relationship between the mind and the body? And he's saying, well, no, you've made a category error. Here are the list of primitive notions, and they're separate again. And it's like he's rarefying the distinction, at least in the way I'm understanding it.
Yeah.
The very gesture of him saying you made a category error suggests that they are separate categories, which is not answering Elizabeth's question, right?
Well, I mean, I think there's a really interesting parallel here, because here we have an encounter between, two philosophers, between Elizabeth and Descartes, and basically there's a problem in Descartes' system and he's not giving a fully satisfactory response. Eloise, you had an encounter that brought you into the sphere of philosophy as well, with a philosopher's system. Were you convinced that it solved all the problems that you came to it with, or did it seem to you that it had a flaw to begin with?
I didn't identify a flaw, but I'm not la grecque. No, that's a really good question. I think so Oliver's referring to my encounter with the philosophy of Alain Badiou, which I was taught. I feel like I encountered a teacher who introduced me to Badiou, who I suppose for me brought together various interests of mine in a way that I was attracted to or seduced by, even because it was so, firstly I think because one of the things Badiou affirms, and we can maybe talk about this in relation to what Descartes says to Elizabeth a bit later on, is that you like things can be thought and we can think things, and I think that was particularly attractive to me at that point in relation to my engagement with theatre and with politics, and the idea that we can think these things together but that they're not the same thing and that they each have their essence, I guess. For me is something that made a lot of sense, and I still think that that's what Badiou enables, right? It has enabled me to think and to think better. His system has enabled me to think.
The relationship. Because he does say, and I think that is one of the liberating things that I certainly found when I encountered Badiou's philosophy.
I should say as well that I encountered it through your translation as well,
yes.
that was the
as
book.
we all did.
Yeah,
yes.
I mean that book did change my life.
The
so
sacred
Oliver,
text.
Yeah,
that Oliver
truly, because that wasn't the
100%.
first taste of Badiou's philosophy I got. It was a far shorter text, but then I remember ordering and reading a copy of Being an Event over a summer holidays in my house and just being oh wow, fuck, this is it. Yeah,
it is a real trip, that particular book. And for me, when I encountered Badiou's philosophy, I had been reading a lot of French post-structuralist philosophy that moved between aesthetics and politics, and wanted to try and politicize aesthetics, or was worried about the aestheticization of politics.
Yeah, exactly.
Classic Benjamin problem.
Yeah. And what I loved about Badiou is he basically said, look, events that provoke us to think can occur in the sphere of politics and they can occur in the sphere of art, but they have different logics.
Yes.
They're separate spheres, and you don't do politics directly through art,
no.
nor can you do art directly through politics. Yeah. They're separate types of truths and praxis that unfold there. Yeah. But as philosophers, we can think them
together.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I've always found that there was that really kind of interesting moment in one of his other books, Conditions, where he says when one of the truth procedures tries to determine the truth of a different one, so say if politics attempts to decide the truth of art, that is, politics decides what kind of arts can be produced, etc., that's a disaster. It's and he gives, goes through all the examples of and vice versa, when politics tries to decide what the truth of love is, or art decides what the truth of science is. There's this kind of like, it's a disaster when you cross your wires and don't recognize that there's different logics in operation. Yeah, right. But also, I like the way that you put it, Eloise, where it's like it allows you to think things that normally we go, oh, that kind of has like an autonomy of practice. We can't really think about what theatre is or what music is.
I mean, that's what people like the contemporary field of theatre and performance studies, I think, persistently makes claims. And I mean, I should say that a lot of this is based on like research I did a few years ago for my PhD. But there is a relation between what they now call performance and power, these two like incredibly diffuse categories, that they do interact, but just in all these different ways that we can't really rationally determine. We can't really think about it. So let's throw up our hands and just be like, look, sometimes performance reinforces power, sometimes it challenges power, sometimes, But it's like with Badiou, like that, I mean, if you, it completely like loses, I guess, the singularity, firstly, of art and an art form in amongst the kind of whatever we want to call the society of the spectacle, whatever it is. But like it also, so therefore we lose this idea that this practice thinks for itself in its own terms and has something to say that is potentially interventionist, critical, whatever whatever term you want to use, new, but also that we lose that if we don't think about the relation rationally and coherently, if that makes sense, and it's the same with this idea of power, like that Badiou kind of will think about in a sort of more I guess like rigorous and rational way, where he thinks about the state, right? So it he kind of allows those terms to narrow back from performance and power to like theatre and the state, and
well, I mean, exactly, because he actually develops a very close reading of Jean Genet's play The Balcony, and it's through that particular reading of that play that he develops a notion of the dominant ideology of our age, which is what he calls democracy, democratic materialism, which holds that there are only bodies and languages, and he develops that through a reading of just one play. So it's very, very specific, and he develops a political concept, a concept of an ideology, out of the reading of a specific piece of theatre.
Yeah, I only read that piece of theatre a few weeks ago under Oliver's advice, and absolute trip. Very difficult to orient yourself within at the beginning, but then as it kind of unfolds, as this kind of like it's an incredible play. Yeah. So. Elizabeth. Bad. Whoa! I mean, are we dealing with a love encounter here? Is this a love? Is this an event? Is this an event between two philosophers?
I think it is, in a certain way. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we have a figure of world history, and
he's faithful to the correspondence. Like he pursues it, and he modifies his position in response to her objections.
He writes a whole book, right? Doesn't he? He writes the passions.
Passions of the soul.
Passions of the soul.
Yeah. He writes a whole treatise, and then she reviews it, and she says, "Yeah, this is pretty good. There are two problems
here." I'm still unsatisfied. Try as you might. All your intellectual posturing, you still haven't satisfied me, Descartes. I need more.
Well, you can't blame her. I mean, his first response, after he says we've got these three different primitive notions, he then says, look at heaviness. Look at the concept of heaviness, right? Yeah. We think that heaviness is the same thing as a body, and that's what the quality of heaviness is, what makes bodies go down towards the centre of the earth. Right? Okay. So this is before we had any notion of gravity. This is pre-Newton, right? And he says, we know that the bodies move down towards the centre of the earth without necessarily touching. They're not. It's not something pressing upon them that pushes them down towards the earth. It is action at a distance. Okay. Mechanism has a problem explaining action at a distance with magnetism and with what we later on call gravity, right? And he says, actually, and this is where it's really strange, this analogy, he says, actually, we know that weight and the body are exactly the same thing from a mechanist approach. The scholastics are wrong when they say that weight is this kind of separable property inside the body that makes the body go downwards. Yeah. But then what he also wants to say is the soul is in the body and causes it to move in the same way that weight is in the body and causes it to move. Elizabeth's response is What?
What are you talking? It just reminded me of like the very very foolish reflections I had, because there's a big problem right at this time where it's like, how do we think, these intangible things, like, we're being dragged down to the center of what seems intangible. How does it react with tangible material things? And I've made this the joke on the podcast where I'm like, what's wind? I don't know, it's all around me, it's an intangible thing that's moved me around.
It's that little guy in the corner of the map with the big cheeks.
Yeah, the one who's blowing, the one who's blowing the wind across the map. But yeah, so it's like, of course Elizabeth's going to be like, what are you talking about? What kind of answer is that? The soul is in the body that makes it move in the same way that weight is in the body that drags it down. What is this?
Well, she goes back, she cuts to the chase. She says, look, the problem is that you're talking about something immaterial.
Yeah.
Right. Stop talking about scholastic notions of heaviness. We know they're all wrong according to mechanism. She's a mechanist. Fine, she was educated in scholasticism, but she's a rebel as well, philosophically speaking. She adopted the whole mechanist system herself. So don't talk to me about a scholastic notion of heaviness. She says, I can't imagine the immaterial as anything else apart from the negation of matter. Right. So I've still got my problem. You haven't solved it. How can something immaterial move something material?
I kind of love this moment. This is like, for me, this is Elizabeth the materialist, right? She's say that the mind is also matter, that it's a body like other bodies, then you've got rid of your whole problem, right?
Yeah.
The materialist answer, your problem is your idealism, the immateriality of the soul, mind, whatever. If you just get rid of that, no more problems.
Exactly. And for me, this is like a model philosophical discussion, right?
Yeah.
She doesn't get lost in technical details. She basically says, look, as a philosopher, you've got these big options open to you, right? If you can't show how something immaterial can move something material, then you might as well choose the other option, which is to say that the soul does have matter and extension.
Yeah.
Right? Just take that position.
Yeah, make up your mind, take a decision on the event, follow through with the consequences of the decision you're going to make, be a materialist, then you've solved all your problems, right?
Yeah, she says you need to say that the mind moves the body via, she uses this notion of information, that's the term that she uses. And she says you need to allow that the animal spirits themselves are intelligent.
Yes.
I just want to talk to you about animal spirits because it's one of my favourite bits in Descartes.
Yeah.
I always knew you were keen to.
Yeah. So we have our whole nervous system, which, because he practices anatomy, he's traced it, like all the nerve pathways.
Yeah.
And he talks about the nerve sheaths as well, and the fibres and these like ropes that we've got going through our body.
Yeah.
Now, apparently what's happening, according to him, is because he doesn't have a notion of electricity, right? But what he does have a notion is that these tiny, tiny little animal spirits that are very subtle bodies, and they're flickering up and down our nerve pathways all the time, right? They're like little messengers, like running really, really, really fast up and down our nerve pathways, up through the spinal cord, all the way up through the center of the brain, right into the brain, right? And so this continual like traffic of animal spirits bustling past each other, right? And the passions themselves, later on, he's going to explain them as a particular kind of agitation of the animal spirits that will cause us, for example, when we're embarrassed, to blush, right? Or when we're scared, for the hair to prick up on the back of our neck, that kind of thing, right?
Or when you're talking to a princess and you...
and you get sweaty palms, right? That's the animal spirits. And I've actually got like a technical question for you, Eloise, because we know that you do practice two professions, right?
Yes.
Can you tell me, like, how is it, like, that actors, obviously you can't, when you're in the middle of a scene, when you're acting, you can't suddenly think, I want to twitch my mouth in this particular way to convey this particular emotion, right? You don't have time to think all that kind of things. But if you're a practicing actor, you do manage to do that. So there's something happening between your mind and your body, like, what's happening to your animal spirits, Eloise? That's what I want to know.
Oh, that's a good question.
I mean, the question should be open to both parties, as all you yourself are also of the theatrical persuasion.
A rank amateur. Thanks very much. Proud amateur.
Yes, I would love to hear from the actors. What are your animal spirits doing when you're acting? Right?
I mean, it's definitely, I think, you don't, I mean, it would be, if you were like self-consciously thinking about your face as you were trying to act, it would probably be, you'd seem weird, right? Like just like any one of us when we're feeling super self-conscious and we're like aware of how our face and body are behaving in space. It like sort of removes you from the present or something. That's a good question. I think I'm a real believer in acting like the basics, right? That it's just like rehearsal, which literally, repetition, that you're just like, doing this thing again and again and making more and more sense of the language in a sense, if the moment has language, but otherwise, the other kind of things that you're trying to convey. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, what is the mind-body interaction? Because I think you can sort of like, you can put your body in space and then, I mean, some people do that. I think they work from the sort of outside in. If you work yourself into a particular physical state. But I guess like for the like the other thing that we're forgetting in this analogy or whatever this is the audience, right? Like the effect on the spectator is what Oliver's pointing to in that sense. It's like, the spectator is the one that registers whatever's going on in the face and body and derives meaning from that.
Exactly.
And that's a whole different thing as well, I think one can try and express and I mean there can be failure at like every level,
Sure.
in this situation. So we're exactly the animal spirits. I mean, I guess like sometimes you feel that there's something beyond, that there is like a third thing, right, that is occurring.
I remember. I was just thinking about.
There are truths.
And they're out there.
It's not just substance.
The truth is out there.
I didn't answer your question.
Well, I feel like you did in some way. It's like the repetition of the body to suspend the activity of the mind.
It's the answer of habits.
You start not thinking. So that's,
exactly, yeah.
And that's, I mean, I want Badu for philosophy, but in theatre you don't want to think. Like it's true. Like suspend the meditation and just go for it. Like,
That's what Descartes says. He says we all know what the union of the mind and the body is when we stop philosophizing.
Exactly. We're doing it. Like we're living it.
At one point he actually says to Elizabeth, look, right, what I want you to do is to maintain the distinction between the mind and the body as I've taught everybody. Right? So do that philosophy, and at the very same time I want you to stop doing philosophy and stop worrying about this, because when you're not a philosopher, you know that the mind is united with the body. Right? So he says, be a philosopher and don't be a philosopher at exactly the same time. What a correspondent. I mean, what kind of...
Anti-philosophy and philosophy, joining together.
But doesn't Badu sort of identify, I mean, maybe this is what Badu says, or maybe it's not, maybe I'm completely wrong, but doesn't he sort of identify in Descartes this like hidden dualism that isn't just the mind and body, but also that there are things and there are truths, right? Or whatever. I mean,
Absolutely.
That's Badu in his terms. So in sense, like, we know that the mind, like that's something we just know, like it's sort of like a truth that we can't even necessarily name, or that doesn't have like existence in a sort of like...
That's why it is...
In a substantial sense, because, it's...
But I mean, like,
so there's a thirdness there as well.
And that's what's so fascinating. Like, it just goes like what you just said. He goes, what is the primitive notion? There's what the fourth primitive, or the fourth category of primitive notions is that there's just the union of mind and body. That's the one primitive notion that's self-contained by itself. That is a truth, right? It's that kind of union. And I was just like, I find it interesting as well. I'm sorry to go back to the acting kind of example, but because
I'm sorry for you.
No.
I'm not going to ramble like I did before.
No, it's because I find it really interesting, and I wanted to ask both of you about this as well, because I dabbled in music. I performed a few times on stage, and one thing I found really fascinating, not only is this the suspension of thought, when I'm playing guitar, I don't want to be thinking, and then I need to put my hand here and then go over here. But what I find really interesting in the performative sense is, when you're giving a performance, is the temporality, right? You get up on stage, you start, and then suddenly the last note, and suddenly you come to, and you're like, oh, the performance is done. there's a weird suspension of temporality that I find
Oh, right.
fascinating.
And you experience like an eclipse of time.
Yeah, well, you just suddenly
What
you
kind
play
of
the first
music were you playing?
just prog rock half-hour jam. I was playing a few different bands.
Did a guitar solo or something like the next day.
Angus Young. I play in little folk trio bands. I did play in prog bands.
But there were separate songs with beginnings and ends.
Yeah. Like at least with the folk band, you'd just have songs with beginnings and ends. But even between the songs, I wouldn't. Yeah, maybe just because I wasn't talking on stage or whatever. Or I don't know.
You weren't the lead singer. You weren't actually talking to the audience.
No. I mean, we had the.
You weren't saying hello, Brisbane. We're so happy to be back.
G'day. Here we are with another strip. No, but it's like even. I mean, you have the set list. It's already ordered for you, and you kind of know what the set list is, and then you just play it, and then suddenly you come to, and then the performance. Surely you have this experience of you go on stage and suddenly.
I feel like I'm hyper aware of like.
Oh really?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I mean
You live through each slow.
But that's what's amazing.
Century,
it's like I'm aware sometimes of the audience of even like I could see a
Yeah.
particular person and how they're responding.
Hi, Mum.
Yeah. But then also like very aware of like trying to be.
I mean, I was just shoegazed without the actual.
I mean, you were like in a flow state. Is
No,
that what they call a flow
yeah.
state?
Yeah, I was just shoegazed without any of the music, I was just looking at my shoes like I can't look at there's no audience, I'm suspending the audience.
Yeah.
My animal spirits are staying with me, thank you very much.
Well, there's one final thing that I wanted to talk about here because I think it's actually something that joins all of us. So here we have, Luna's been on her own road trip in philosophy, and here she's come to like another part of her trip in which she's met this amazing woman, this amazing philosopher, Elizabeth.
Yeah,
right.
We found a friend.
Yeah, and that is a fundamental point. So Descartes actually does find a friend.
He finds a friend. It's no longer me, myself, and I, nothingness, God, bodies.
Exactly.
There's a person.
She signs off, "You're very affectionate friends."
Yeah.
Right. And it seems quite genuine because she has a lot of sympathy for the theological controversies in which he's embroiled. He actually has to go to court to defend his system at one point in 1645.
Yeah.
He's very sympathetic for her, for the various illnesses that she goes through.
Yes.
He basically is in the position of trying to console her.
Yeah.
So they have like a genuine complicity and friendship. So he's found a friend.
Yeah.
Right?
It's not just intellectual posturing with correspondence. There's a genuine. Well, there's a genuine concern. He's being her doctor. Not only of the body, because she gets quite sick later on, but of the mind.
Yeah, and I also think that there's another thing in this correspondence that attracts me, and it's this idea of voyaging for philosophy. Like actually going on a journey for it. And she's in exile. She's in her own very long kind of stuck journey. Like she wanted to keep moving, and eventually she moves away from The Hague and like founds this convent.
Is that in Heidelberg? She does that, or doesn't she have something to do with Heidelberg?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And he gets summoned, as we know, at the end of his life, unfortunately, to Sweden by another royal intellectual, Queen Christine of Sweden. And all of us here, we've also made a voyage, like made a kind of pilgrimage in a certain sense to a very particular city, which is Paris.
Yes.
And I was just wondering, like, why did we do that? Like, what was it about this city that brought us here to keep doing philosophy?
Well, there's just no work in Australia. No, but there is something special about Paris. Obviously, it's old hat to kind of say, but for me, it's always striking the history that's just so present because, the French make a very big deal of publicly displaying history. On every street you walk down, there's plaques that say this is where Voltaire died. This is where Jacques Lacan practiced psychoanalysis. This is where Balzac is buried. This is not that far from Merleau-Ponty and Bourdieu. There's just this kind of living history here, not only just with the academics who are working here, but just this kind of, his sense of historical embodiment, if I can put it like that,
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And I think, for me, I've loved being here in Paris teaching at AUP, and I also taught I wasn't in Paris, but I took a train out to Le Havre to
Ah,
teach as
right.
well. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I've been doing lots of. It's been fantastic, and I've loved it. But the other times I've spent extended periods of time in Paris were to do theatre, and so for me, Paris is, and that's not just a dead people thing. It's like a living, breathing. I mean, you know, I guess there are all these arguments one could make for like whether the theatre scene's still the same, or you know, whether it's past its heyday. But for me, it's incredible. Like it's, you know, it's still this place where you know, people are brought here from other places. People, you know, make work here. Australia has, I like, I guess this is the way I've started to phrase it, like work I think of a very high quality, and I do think that in both the sort of my fields of interest, theatre and philosophy and academia, but the quantity isn't the same, right? Like when you come here, it's just like this, you know, there's something kind of intoxicating about it. And like I've been going to talks at the Collège de France and like seeing plays at night, and like in fact I rarely stay home at night. I mean, I'm also without my children for the first time in a while, so there's also that, which is both difficult, but it also means I'm free. But even so, like just to it's like a chocolate shop or something, you know, like it's like it's
there are so many
like,
seminars going on.
Yeah,
Embarrassment of choice.
there's so much going on. And
I mean,
for me it feels sorry.
There are rival Spinoza seminars. Like you have two different Spinoza seminars you can go to, for example.
Right. And
you better not try to go to both of them.
Yeah.
In the fad books.
They will find out.
Yeah.
There are two different Marx seminars that are running as well.
Of course.
There's a Hegel seminar, there's the Hobbes seminar, there's, you know, and then there are seminars organised by theme as well.
Oh yeah. That's unbelievable. There's no shortage. But good luck finding them. You won't find anything on Google. You need to be on the right mailing list. You need to be in the right part. You need to know the right people, the right connections.
Okay.
But then, there's this incredible, you know, active, living, intellectual scene.
Life,
It's not just history. It's not resting on its laurels. There's still just so much everywhere all the time. You know.
And for you, Oliver, or are you going to answer for yourself?
Yeah, it was, so there's family history. So my grandfather did the family tree and found French ancestry. When I was a kid growing up in England, our first family holidays were to France. And so as a kid growing up in grey, miserable England, France was the country of absolute happiness and sensual pleasure.
Yeah.
Because we went to the beach, my father ate like pig's feet and cow's feet and experimented with what he was eating. I was taught, you know, one phrase in French, je voudrais une glace, s'il vous plaît. Because I had to go, because we were at a camping site, and I had to go and ask for an ice block to put in the esky to keep stuff cool.
That's
glass is ice cream.
That's glaçon.
No, this was actually, it wasn't ice cream, it was, I got it wrong. And I confessed to the lady who was selling the ice, and she actually spoke back to me in English, which was a great disappointment.
You gave it a go.
Yeah, but I basically wanted to go to a very difficult game. I just thought that the game in philosophy in Paris is going to be very, very difficult. And certain aspects of the game in philosophy in the mid-90s in Sydney had become quite predictable. I mean, there are certain fights between people who are in different camps, the Lacanians, the Derrideans, the Heideggerians, the Deleuzians, and I felt like I had come to understand those relationships and that they weren't actually helping me with my philosophical problem. And I was very, very lucky to get an Australian government grant as a doctoral student that allowed me the freedom to actually go overseas. So I think that's the great thing about the Australian doctorate, well, back then, was on the one hand, you're thrown in the deep end. So unlike the Americans, there's no coursework to do. You're completely on your own. So I was 23 and was said, write 100,000 word thesis. And on the other hand, you've got absolute freedom to do it on what you want. And then if you can justify via the topic of your thesis going over abroad, you will be paid your scholarship whilst you're abroad. And so I was like on Australian government money studying my PhD in France. And it was absolutely addictive and a very heady experience.
And you were doing street theatre with puppets and Harlequin.
Well, you know,
the
Australian government grants are good, but they're not that good. you take a little bit extra, right?
Oh, I thought you meant they were so good that they were funding street theatre.
Well, in a certain way they were, right?
Can I just make one alarmingly abrupt segue
Yes.
at the end of this episode, which is to via metro systems. So we've been talking about Paris. One of the great things about Paris is the metro system.
Yes.
I think this is, for me, is like socialism in action. This is how the people can afford to move about very easily.
Yeah.
As we know,
I mean, it's not cheap, is it? Like, are we...
compared to London,
Okay,
compared to London,
Compared to
okay.
Melbourne.
I mean, I never
it's
got it together
subsidised.
to get the monthly pass.
Oh,
So
no,
maybe
you've
I'm just...
No,
Yeah,
you've
okay.
been doing this whole time without the monthly pass.
Yeah.
With the
Okay.
with the monthly
Yeah,
pass,
yeah.
it's €40. You pay €10 a week. Unlimited travel.
Yeah.
It's incredibly cheap.
I'm
So
a
no-
dum-dum. It was just like one more piece of admin that I didn't...
Yeah.
Yeah.
They do make it hard though because
Yeah.
you have to go in,
You
get
get
the
a
card
photo,
with the
yeah.
that's annoying. But anyway, sorry.
So-
I'll-
Sorry.
no metro system is more than 500 meters away from your doorway.
Mhm.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah,
Like the-
and
yeah,
anywhere
yeah.
in Paris you want to go, it'll take you half an hour max to
Yeah,
get there.
yeah.
Using the metro system.
Yeah.
So this is one of the reasons why I stayed. I also think that if you're not particularly rich, Paris is still a livable city.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
For transport, for the
Yeah.
childcare costs, all these kinds
I
of
mean,
things.
a lot of housing is subsidised as well by
Exactly.
like
Yeah.
various companies
Yeah.
or the city
Yeah.
or like
well,
lots of
25% of Paris, over 25% is social housing.
social housing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible.
So please try and follow me on this segue. I want to
Okay,
from
sorry. Yeah.
the Parisian
keep
metro
interrupting.
system to the Tokyo subway system.
Oh,
Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right?
I-
So how do I get there? So basically, what they did in the research center for at Hokkaido University, right, is that they actually, in the research center for electronic science, they set out a map of the Tokyo subway system for some slime mold, right? So they put little bits of wheat germ. So wheat germ, I've been eating it. It's very good for my cholesterol, apparently. It's very good for slime mold as well. They love it. And they put little piles of slime mold on like a glass plate in the exact position, corresponding positions to where the major population centers of Tokyo are, right?
Yeah.
Put the slime mold, which is just a one-celled organism, in the middle, right? And basically said to the slime mold, go eat, have fun.
Yeah.
So it spreads out these tendrils in every direction, 360 degrees at the beginning. It discovers the food. That's an event for slime mold,
Yes.
discovering food.
yes.
And then the tubes, the tendrils that it sends out to the food, they start to thicken. And the tendrils that went out into no man's land, they just wither away and die. And basically the slime mold created the most efficient network of feeding tubes between these spots of wheat germ on the glass plate. And in doing so, it replicated the Tokyo subway system.
Yes.
I do know about
Yeah.
this.
And it took, it took the Tokyo railway engineers like years to figure out
Yeah.
what's the best system of connecting tunnels and railways
Yeah.
to connect all these
Yeah,
population
yeah.
centers. The slime mold figures it out in a matter of days, right? So here you have Elizabeth's hypothesis, right? She's
Yeah.
basically saying, think of mind as extended in space, right? As material. And what this is it's the beginning of an emergentist philosophy of mind.
Yeah.
That is, if you can see what seems to be a mental operation occurring in slime mold at an absolutely material level, an organization of feeding tubes, right? That is something that we think is only advanced use of reason can actually work out and calculate. You have to have an engineering degree,
Yeah.
right? And here what you're seeing is matter organizing itself and replicating a function of mind, right? At a basic level. And so mind itself, what we call mind, is something that just emerges at a higher level of
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah.
But you've already got some of its functions
Mm.
at this pure level of extension of matter.
Yeah.
You know, the slime mold trying to feed itself.
Well, this is what Diderot is going to make this same point in the Rêve d'Alembert, or the Entretien avec Alembert. It's like matter itself contains all of these functions of mind, right? And then Marx is also going to say, consciousness is just the highest form of matter. It's a particular form of organization. But it made me think as well. She's making a very materialist claim here. So I totally understand why she didn't want this correspondence to be published, right? Because this is just straight materialism, no soul, no God. We don't need that.
She's more radical
But
than
doesn't
Descartes.
she say that that thought does exist as a separate faculty, though, like independent from? I mean, she doesn't just say that it's.
Oh yeah, she didn't just say it is
purely
brute.
material.
But she's
or brute,
saying, but she is saying that it's like your whole problem is that you're not treating mind as a body, which is matter and extendable, right?
Yeah.
If you treat the mind in this way, which is basically, she doesn't say it openly, but basically says, yeah, if you treat mind as matter, you don't have this whole problem that you've run into. She's way more radical than Descartes. I much prefer her.
But Eloise, I mean, Eloise is right here because she actually does say, okay, fine, for thought itself, extension is not necessary.
It's a faculty that doesn't need extension.
Yeah.
I think she says that.
But
I was reading
she says,
an article.
she says, I think there might be some other functions of the soul that we're not aware of, right? And perhaps they're lower level functions of the soul, as I was saying with this emergentist kind of gradualist hypothesis. There are these other functions that do require extension. But we don't know about them yet.
She says, I mean, I have a quote here from the 1st of July letter. She says, even though extension is not necessary to thought, being not at all repugnant to it, that is, extension, could suit some other function of the soul, which is no less essential to it.
Yeah, precisely, yeah.
Okay.
And so she opens up, I mean, here she is, a founder of the whole mind-body problem, the philosophy of mind. She opens up an entire research program. She says there are other functions of the soul that we don't yet know about.
We don't know,
that might be extended. At the level of like nerve pathways, neurons, for example, later on. And, you know, I think that...
Actually, it says in this article that we don't have a record of Descartes' reply to that, which is fascinating. And that's when the particular exchange stops. So she kind of had the last word in this...
Yeah, and it's a
particular
shame.
Instance, like
No, and I think it's a shame because because she's so busy running around, she's in exile, dealing with all these geopolitical problems. She never gets to. She says, I've never had the time to be able to sit down and meditate in the way that you did, you trust fund kid. So we don't have she doesn't have a
she's
body
too
of
busy
work.
like curtsying.
Yeah, it's like I'm too busy solving this war-torn Europe. I don't have time to retreat into a cottage. But it's a shame we don't have a body of her philosophical work. All we have are her correspondences with various people, right? Yeah, she's corresponding with Malebranche really, for a little bit as well.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's like an epistolary treatise or something that.
But I mean, what an incredible project to open up, the history of thought to, in some letters.
Well, yeah, and I think it's certainly opened things up for Luna as well. I mean, Luna can't rest easy thinking that Descartes solved things.
No, Luna's very, very discontent. We've got this mind-body problem, and I think...
where are you going to go with that mind-body problem?
I think the only person who knows how to solve this is a certain Dutchman by the name of Benedict de Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza.
A mysterious lens grinder.
It looks like Luna's going to need another book.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's just promise our listeners, as one of my students said, Spinoza is husband material.
Oh, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yes.
Another of my students said he's
job, I guess.
Yeah. That, and he looks like Adrian Brody.
Yes.
Some people's tastes.
He's easy on the eyes. In the history of philosophy, he's one of the ones that's easier on the eyes.
One of the very few.
They're few and far between, and he's a looker. So thank you so much, Eloise, for joining us this week, being one of Luna's other friends.
It was my pleasure. It's great to be with Luna.
Absolutely.
Both of you too.
Thanks so much. And as always, it's been great, and we hope to have our listeners on board for the next session.
Yes.
The next stage in Luna's journey.
Yes, a new book. All right. Thank you so much, and see you next time.
Goodbye.